Now on to the charrette scheduling exercise itself. I'm going to show you two options for charrette schedules. This first option is the one we've been working with, the 7-day charrette schedule, or what we call the Cadillac version of the charrette. This is for very complicated projects that are very political and are very complex in its design nature. In this project format, as you see at the bottom, the charrette begins with the input session from the community, and then the design begins, working through alternative concepts, through preferred plan to final plan and production. In this format, there's 4 to 6 weeks after the charrette with a review and revise session that we'll talk about, followed by a return to the public with 1 or 2 days of meetings. Now this is for very complex projects. Another way to go about charrette scheduling is the following. For moderately or easy projects, you can possibly basically take the first part of the 7-day charrette schedule that we just talked about and move it earlier, maybe 4 to 6 weeks before the actual charrette. On the left-hand column here, you see 1 day of stakeholder meetings and public meetings, with the public kickoff meeting that evening. At the end of that public kickoff meeting on day 1, the message to the community is, we'll be back in a month or so. In the meantime, we're going to create alternative designs based on what we heard tonight, and we're going to come into the charrette with alternative designs to present. So you're basically fast tracking the charrette by starting with alternative concepts. So in this 5-day charrette, you can get by with 5 days because you get to the alternative, the preferred plan, in the middle of day 2. And it basically fast tracks the project as compared to the 7-day charrette. The same kind of follow-up occurs afterwards with review and revise and final review. So basically, depending on the complexity of the project, you can divide up your 3 feedback loops accordingly. This diagram shows on the left-hand side the level of project complexity. So from your complexity analysis, and in particular from the budget, the time, the design, and politics, the more complex, the more days you need continuously. That's NCI's position, that particularly with political and design complexity, it's best to stay with the project in place and complete those 3 feedback loops in place without going away. By going away, you risk political problems in the continuous 7-day process, or even further down into the 5-day process. You're there to be able to take care of the unexpected political situations. You're there to be able to develop the plan to a refined degree. The easier projects down on the bottom, let's just say it's just the design of a park. Let's just say that the political will is very strong to make it happen. Then you can probably get away with more of a 3-day process. I'm not even sure we would call that a charrette. We would call probably a workshop. But nonetheless, the 3 feedback loops find their way into every one of these processes. Now it's time to create your charrette schedule for the case study. Here we see again the 7-day prototypical charrette schedule with the meetings in color. Here we see a charrette schedule created by a team in an NCI course. It's made up of post-it notes of different colors. This particular schedule, the team created a 5-day charrette preceded by a 1-day. On the left there you see that Thursday. That Thursday was at least a week before the 5-day charrette itself, and proceeded by another 1 day on Thursday after the charrette. You'll see here also the budgeting that takes place on the bottom, showing the number of team members that are present, the people who are being paid at each day of the charrette, and an estimated budget for their labor. You're going to create post-it notes to become pieces of your schedule. So the first thing that we instruct is for you to take small yellow post-it notes and make one for each public meeting in the charrette. The next is to take a small blue or other colored post-it note to indicate team meetings and stakeholder meetings. So we're going to refer to the stakeholder analysis to find your stakeholder meetings for your charrette. Here you see, remember the stakeholder analysis that you did early in the course. You're going to look in the final column here that says charrette preparation, and wherever you've indicated separate meetings, you need to make a small blue post-it for each one of those separate meetings and name the meeting. Next, you're going to create larger green colored post-its or some other color that you have to indicate each phase of the charrette process. The vision phase, alternative concept phase, preferred plan phase, plan development phase, and production phase. Here we have them. These are the 5 phases of the charrette process. So back to the 7-day charrette schedule. Here you see those 5 phases in colors behind the cells. Each phase changes with some type of public meeting or stakeholder review. So you see at the beginning of day 2, you're moving into alternative concepts. The beginning of day 4, you're moving into preferred plan synthesis. In the midday of 5, you're moving into plan development, and midday, day 6, you're moving into production. Here's an example of how the meetings spread out in a charrette. You're going to take your post-it notes and start to place them on the various days when you want to have your public meetings and your stakeholder meetings. Here again is the example from one of our trainings. This team decided they would have a 5-day charrette, which is in the middle of the schedule here, starting on a Thursday, ending on a Monday. The charrette was preceded by a 1-day set of meetings and public meeting, maybe a month ahead of time, and proceeded by another public meeting to wrap up the process maybe a month or so later. So this team used different colored post-its as the post-its they had at their disposal. You can look through and see how they paced their work. You need to create your own schedule according to your case study. Now down on the bottom, notice the budgeting. The bottom you see team members, the second to the last row. This is the estimated number of people that will be at this particular charrette paid for a day of work. So here you see one day they have 3 people there, another day they have 5 people. Now these are not staff. This is not volunteers. These are people who are paid consultants. The bottom number is the estimated amount of money that you would pay for the labor plus travel to get there and lodging. We gave this team the number of $1,600 per person per day for time, travel, and lodging. This whole thing ended up being about $75,200. Now remember, you have to get your own budget numbers. $1,600 a person a day may work in one region, may not work in another region. The main thing is to try and estimate how much you're going to have to pay people to be at the charrette, and then total up to a total estimated budget number. Now it's time to pull it all together and project a budget for the project. Here's a typical project budget by phase. A large community planning project like the one you've been working on can devote half the budget to pre-charrette. The public outreach, the base data work, the project management can sometimes take that much of your budget. The charrette itself can take up to 1/3 of the budget. leaving the remaining piece for the post charrette. To make a ballpark estimate of the budget for your project, all you need is the charrette schedule and your charrette system roadmap. So looking back at the charrette schedule, the budget estimate that you'd have from this one is then transferred into your charrette roadmap.